Daily use of TSI-3B to reduce my stroke risk. Number 1617, April 29, 2026. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category Stroke, Lifestyle and Health. Introduction. Since arriving in Hawaii on February 28, 2026, I started my research on how to prevent having a second stroke. I came up with the idea of the TSI-Stroke 3B risk model. Inspired by Newton's law of motion. Force equals mass times acceleration. This serves as a practical proxy of the triggering sensitivity index. TSI for stroke risk. After writing dozens of articles on this subject, I further extended this concept to cardiovascular disease CVD, chronic kidney disease CKD, and seizures, for the reader's reference. I will represent my TSI stroke proxy as follows. TSI-3B equals SBP DBP 45 times SBP 120 times. Glucose 100 times amplifier, where the amplifier is defined as 100 for diabetes less than 10 years, 110 for diabetes between 11 to 20 years, 120 for diabetes more than 20 years. With regard to TSI values, if TSI is less than 90, you are safe. If TSI is between 90 and 99, you are still safe. If TSI is between 100 and 109, you should be cautious about your risk. If TSI is greater than 110, you are entering a dangerous zone. From the TSI value, you can immediately identify whether the warning source comes from glucose or blood pressure. If it comes from glucose, you should immediately reduce your next meal portion by 1/3 to 1/2 and avoid eating high carbohydrate or sugary foods. About 1 hour after eating, you should start to walk at least 2,000 to 3,000 steps. If the higher TSI value comes from blood pressure, you should immediately practice deep breathing. Inhale for 4 seconds, then exhale for 8 seconds. Repeating for 2 to 5 times. At the same time, avoid emotional triggers such as interpersonal conflict or financial stress, since these are the most common causes of blood pressure fluctuation. These immediate interventions can help reduce glucose and/or blood pressure quickly with a noticeable effect. Case study. This morning, my average fasting glucose FPG was approximately 157 mg DL, which matches my CGM data. The most likely reason is that I ate dry dates before going to bed. My blood pressure SBP DBP was normal at about 115/66. This gives a pulse pressure PP equals SBP DBP of 49, which reflects vascular stiffness or blood vessel inelasticity, with 45 mmHg as a reference level. However, my TSI-3B stroke value reached approximately 100 to 105, which is above my safety threshold of 100 and falls into the warning zone. Therefore, I made a fast and simple decision. I skipped breakfast and planned a long walk to reduce my glucose level. After the walk, I would measure both my blood pressure and glucose again to evaluate how much I could bring my TSI-3B stroke risk proxy down. This is a clear example of close monitoring followed by immediate corrective action. When I look at this situation, I can clearly see the cause and effect relationship. Eating sweet food before sleep raised my glucose the next morning. I understand that glucose reflects the underlying structural condition of my blood vessels, including long-term damage such as calcification. In contrast, blood pressure acts more like a triggering force. Even though my blood pressure stayed normal, the elevated glucose risk above the safety threshold because high glucose continuously damages vascular structure over time. This leads to an important conclusion: human disease risk does not simply add up, it multiplies. Instead of ignoring the number, I acted immediately. I stopped eating more food and avoided additional digestion load by skipping breakfast. At the same time, I used walking to help my glucose recover. This is not passive observation, it is active intervention based on real-time data. Walking helps in two direct ways. It consumes glucose through muscle activity, and it improves circulation, which reduces stress on blood vessels. Both effects help bring my health system back toward a safer condition. What matters to me is not only lowering the number, but also how quickly my body can recover. This recovery speed reflects the strength and stability of my overall system. That is why I always measure again after intervention. This small event also reminds me of an important rule: eating sugar late at night has a direct and visible effect the next morning. The body does not forget. What I do the night before will appear in my data the next morning. Analogy of a bank loan: if I borrow money from a bank, that debt must eventually be repaid with interest. My body works in a similar way. This analogy reflects 3 key mechanisms that I observe clearly in my own data. First, there is a delay effect, where actions taken today do not show their full consequences immediately, but appear later. Second, there is accumulation, where repeated small actions gradually build a larger total burden over time. Third, there is amplification, where the final cost becomes greater than the original input, just like interest added to a loan. This analogy is not just for explanation. It is structurally correct when viewed from a physics-based system perspective. Glucose acts as the principal, representing the initial input into the system. Chronic exposure functions as accumulated debt, reflecting the total burden over time. The amplifier represents interest, increasing the system's stress beyond the original level. Hypertension behaves like a sudden withdrawal request, placing immediate demand on the system. Stroke represents system bankruptcy, where the accumulated stress exceeds the system's capacity to maintain stability. This is how I manage my system every day. I detect changes early, act quickly to adjust inputs, measure the results, and continue learning from feedback. Biophysics in plain language, the four beasts and time bombs describe my body as a host system that contains four internal beasts. Two are relatively minor and stable: obesity, which is already under control, and lipids, which remain mild. The other two are dominant and more dangerous: diabetes, glucose, and hypertension, blood pressure. These four factors do not directly produce catastrophic outcomes. Instead, they interact over time to create what I call time bombs inside the system. These include heart attack, kidney failure, stroke, seizures, and in some cases dementia or cancer. These events are not random. They are delayed consequences of long-term structural and functional damage created by the continuous interaction of these four factors, beasts. Among the four, glucose acts as the primary structural driver. Food, especially carbohydrates and sugar, I convert it into glucose and supplies energy to the body, similar to gasoline in a car. However, when glucose remains chronically elevated, it becomes a damaging agent. It gradually weakens blood vessels and tissues. This process is slow, cumulative, and often silent, but it sets the foundation for future worse failure time bombs. Hypertension plays a different role. It is not the primary source of structural damage, but a mechanical force applied to the system. When blood pressure rises, it increases stress on vessel walls. If the structure has already been weakened by long-term glucose exposure, then this added force can trigger an acute event. Therefore, glucose and hypertension should not be viewed as independent or additive risk factors. Their relationship is interactive and multiplicative, which brings along an amplified impact. Glucose defines the condition of the structure. Blood pressure defines the force applied to that structure when both are elevated. The combined effect is amplified through multiplication rather than simple addition. This same interaction applies to other factors such as body weight, lipid levels, food intake, and physical activity. The biomedical system is therefore a coupled, energy-driven system, not a set of isolated variables. From a control perspective, glucose depends on energy balance. Food provides input energy, while physical activity consumes that energy. Managing health is not simply adjusting numbers, but controlling energy flow and accumulation over time. Subsequent lifestyle adjustments. I woke up around 7 a.m. with glucose at 157. My blood pressure was around 110, so the primary issue was glucose, not blood pressure. I skipped breakfast and shifted to a brunch approach. Before eating, I walked for 1,000 steps. My glucose dropped from 157 to about 145. A reduction of approximately 10 to 12 points, which shows limited effect from short-duration activity. Brunch was simple: one piece of codfish as shown in the attached photo, prepared with olive oil and a small amount of salt. There was no sugar and no carbohydrate. Normally, I include vegetables, but vegetables still contain some carbohydrates that can raise my glucose to some degree. At that point, my objective was clear: reduce glucose through energy consumption. The most effective method I have learned is post-meal exercise. At age 79, walking is the safest and most practical form. I then walked for nearly 2 hours, accumulating about 8,000 to 9,000 steps. Close to 10,000, this extended activity produced a strong physiological effect. My glucose dropped below 120, reaching approximately 112 to 114. My daily average glucose was reduced from around 150 to the low 120s. This is a meaningful improvement, although still slightly higher than my usual glucose level of around 110. My blood pressure showed a different response after the long walk. Both SBP and DBP dropped below 100. My heart rate increased somewhat. But heart rate does not play a role in my TSI calculation. From a system perspective, the intervention was effective. My TSI-Stroke value decreased from about 105 warning zone to about 95 safe zone. This transition required sustained effort, not a single action. Today's episode reflects a direct interaction between the host and the internal beasts. The dominant factor today was the glucose diabetic beast, not the blood pressure hypertension beast. In my case, blood pressure remains stable because I avoid major stress sources. I do not engage in interpersonal conflicts or financial pressures. I focus primarily on my medical research. Even when working 14 to 15 hours per day, my blood pressure typically remains below 110 mmHg. The key observation is not just the number, but the effort required to change it. Moving from a risk state TSI above 100 back to a safe state C below 100 requires willpower, time, discipline, and sustained energy output. This section summarizes the post-event adjustment. The final chart will present the detailed numbers along with the meal image. Epilogue. I want to tell my readers one simple truth. Stroke risk reduction does not happen automatically. It requires deliberate effort, strong willpower, and continuous control of energy input to gradually reverse the state of the body's health system. There is no shortcut. The body responds directly to what we do every day. From my perspective, this is not just medical thinking. It is pure physics applied to biomedicine. The body behaves like a dynamic system, where inputs such as glucose, blood pressure, sleep, and activity interact and accumulate over time. When these inputs are controlled, the system can stabilize and even recover. When they are ignored, the system drifts toward instability and eventual failure. This way of thinking focuses on cause and effect, not just observation. It emphasizes system behavior and trajectory, not isolated numbers. Clinically, I believe this approach is far more practical and actionable than population-based risk scores. Those scores describe probability across many people, but they do not tell an individual what is happening inside their own body at this moment, or what to do next. In contrast, a physics-based, system-oriented approach provides a clear direction, controlled inputs, and you can change the outcome. While a doctor sees a probability, the patient lives a trajectory. My risk model gives the patient the steering wheel for that trajectory. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to TSI author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.